Good afternoon and welcome to the 2020 Striking a Balance Caregiver Conference. I'm Rob Fabian with Age of Central Texas, and on behalf of Age and our partners over at the Area Agency on Aging of the Capital Area, we are so glad that you are joining us today for our 19th annual Striking a Balance Caregiver Conference. You know, this is the first time that we have presented our conference virtually. So if along the way today we have a few little technical issues, please forgive us. We're learning as we go. But this is our fourth presentation of the conference for this week, and we are so excited that you're with us because we have an amazing presentation today with Amy Goyer from AARP, from the national offices, to talk about long-distance caregiving. Before we get started today, we've got a quick video we want to share with you, a welcome video from our executive directors of our organizations, along with a message from our presenting sponsor, which is AARP Texas.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 19th Annual Striking a Balance Caregiver Conference, brought to you by the Area Agency on Aging of the Capital Area and Age of Central Texas. We are so happy to have you join us at our first ever virtual conference. We were talking about doing this, and we had a little bit of fear and trepidation, and then we thought, well, all of the caregivers that I know exude resiliency, they exude strength, they always have the ability to turn on a dime. So we thought, well, you know what? We better honor them, and we better do the same thing and host this conference virtually so that we would have the opportunity to engage with y'all again. Some of you might know that we had a lot of repeat caregivers attending our conference every year. We didn't want to let them down, but we also did not want to miss out on bringing in new caregivers. And virtually, we have the opportunity to do that even more. So we are so excited to have you join us in a number of sessions that will address some of the issues that you might encounter during your caregiver journey. I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne.
Hi all, my name is Suzanne Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of Age of Central Texas. And like Patty, I am so glad you've chosen to participate in the 19th Annual Striking a Balance Conference. And what I love, in addition to what Patty just shared, is that if you chose, you could be sitting here in your PJs if you're so inclined. So, a special thank you to the Area Agency on Aging. Patty Bordy and her staff have been exceptional. In addition, a special thank you to Rob Fabian of Age of Central Texas, whose leadership and technology skills have really allowed us to offer it in this format. I want to just share a quote. It's one of my favorites that I apply to my life, depending on where I sit within different challenges. And believe it or not, it's from Lena Horne. And what she said is that it's not the load that breaks you down, it's the way you carry it. So, we know caregiving is full of, swirling things like joy and love and stress. And I could go on and on that one. But we hope through the conference you find new strategies to help you carry that proverbial load. And that you feel supported by Age and the AAA, and that know that we're here for you. So thanks so much for joining us in the conference, and we look forward to hearing your feedback. Take care.
Hello, I'm Jessica Lemon of AARP Texas, and I am pleased that AARP is a proud sponsor of the Striking a Balance Caregiver Conference. As a sponsor, we hope that you are gaining new insights into family caregiving and that you have the opportunity to connect with other caregivers and experts on aging. Family caregiving is a priority for AARP. It's essential to our work today, but that's not all. AARP is doing amazing things to make life better for the age 50+ population and generations that follow. We help people improve their financial well-being and their health. We want people to contribute to society and local communities and to fully enjoy life. Let's take a moment to discover more about what we're up to at AARP.
Our story begins more than 60 years ago inside an abandoned chicken coop where our founder discovered a retired teacher living, no home, no health care. So she said no to this injustice and yes to transforming lives. It's this drive, this compassion that inspired AARP. Today, we empower people to choose how they live as they age. We advocate for health and financial security. We strengthen communities everywhere. We are AARP, creating real possibilities.
I want you to know that AARP has a strong presence throughout Texas in many communities in this great state, including Austin, the capital city where I live and work. This year, AARP Texas is bringing opportunities to our members and others through virtual events like this one we're participating in today, and on platforms like Facebook Live. We hope you have the opportunity to enjoy these free offerings. Not only are there programs to help unpaid family caregivers, but there are presentations to help people avoid being the victims of fraud. We host fitness seminars, and we work with city leaders towards making this an even more age-friendly community. And know this, volunteers are critical to our mission. There are many opportunities for those who can give a little time to volunteer. You can learn more about these local happenings at aarp.org/tx or catch us at the AARP Texas Facebook page. Again, of course, family caregiving is a priority. Here in Texas and across the country, AARP is working with governors, state legislators, and community partners to take common sense steps to support America's 40 million family caregivers. We know that caregivers help their older parents, spouses, and loved ones live independently at home. And right now, AARP is fighting to protect nursing home residents against sickness, neglect, and isolation during the COVID-19 pandemic, while also educating family caregivers on how to advocate for their loved ones. Sadly, more than 62,000 nursing home residents and staff at those facilities have died from COVID-19, and the death toll continues to mount. These are mothers, fathers, grandparents, and spouses with families who love them. Nobody should be going through what nursing home residents and their families are experiencing today. Families want elected leaders to take action now to protect residents of nursing homes and other long-term care facilities. Right now, no state is doing a good enough job to protect these residents and staff. Congress must take immediate action to provide regular testing and personal protective equipment for residents and staff. There should also be timely and reliable reporting of COVID-19 cases and deaths. There also must be virtual visitation allowed for families. And finally, we urge lawmakers not to let nursing homes off the hook for abuse, neglect, and even death. Now is not the time to strip away the rights of nursing home residents. AARP will continue to fight for family caregivers and other families. We appreciate your support and for listening. We have many resources available for family caregivers just like you. One place to go for information is aarp.org/caregiving. Thank you for listening, and thank you for all that you do as family caregivers or to support caregivers.
Thank you so much, Patty and Suzanne. Thank you, Jessica, for that information. Before we introduce our speaker today, I want to go over just a couple of real quick housekeeping things. Number one, we are recording this session. So if for any reason your internet fails at home, you get knocked off of this session, don't worry. We're recording the entire session. We're going to post it to YouTube, and we're going to send you that link so that you will be able to access it after the fact. Maybe you want to go back and look at something that was presented today, or you want to share it with a family member or someone from church. We'll make that available to you. We also sent you some links when we sent you the reminder email about this session that were included in that email. We sent you the program, so take a look at that because it has not only the bios for all of our presenters, but lots of great information for you. We sent you handouts for all of the presentations, so there's lots of great information there. Plus, we put together a lot of caregiver resources just for you. A lot of information from both Age of Central Texas and from the Area Agency on Aging, because this is why we do these conferences. We do them for you. We want to give you the tools, the resources, the knowledge, the hand up, the pat on the back, the shoulder to cry on, whatever you need in your caregiving journey. If you take nothing away from this week, take this and keep it in your heart. It's that you are never alone as a caregiver, because you will always have Age of Central Texas. You will always have the Area Agency on Aging here to assist you no matter where you are in your journey. We will meet you where you are and help you where you are. So it is my pleasure to introduce Michelle Davis. She is with the Area Agency on Aging. and she's going to be your facilitator today, and she's going to introduce Amy Goyer. But before you do that, Michelle, I left out one very important thing, and that is the chat feature. Right down here, you have a chat button. It looks like one of those thought bubbles that you see on the comic strips. We want you to ask questions during this session. And when we get to the end of Amy's presentation, Michelle's going to facilitate those questions with Amy. And we've got Melissa Crawford with the Area Agency on Aging, who's going to be joining us, and we're going to answer your questions. So we want you to ask your questions today. Amy's going to also ask you to participate during the presentation. So that chat button is right down here. Click on that. Ask your questions. We will answer your questions. Because our time is going to be limited since we are live, if we don't get to your question live today, we are still answering your question. One of our experts from the Area Agency on Aging or from Age of Central Texas will contact you directly and answer your question. So without further ado, Michelle, take it away.
Thank you, Rob. Good afternoon and welcome to this presentation on long-distance caregiving. Again, my name is Michelle Davis and I am the Administrative Assistant with the Area Agency on Aging of the Capital Area. And it is my pleasure to introduce Amy Goyer with AARP. Amy is AARP's National Family and Caregiving Expert and moderates AARP's Family Caregivers Discussion Group on Facebook. She has more than 35 years of professional experience serving and advocating for older adults, and Amy has been a family caregiver her entire adult life. She writes extensively for AARP about her experiencing caring for her mother, Patricia, who died in 2013, and her father, Robert, who lived with Alzheimer's for 12 years before his death in 2018. Amy has written 3 books and appears regularly as a caregiving authority on network news as well as other media outlets. As a long-distance caregiver myself, I know how frustrating it can be when we cannot be with our loved ones to care for them. So I look forward to hearing the information presented to you today. So without further ado, I present Amy Goyer.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I have a PowerPoint presentation to show you as I'm talking today. So let's get this technology going and then make sure that you can see that, okay? I hope you can see that. Thank you so much, Michelle and Roy and everyone who's invited me to be here with you and speak with you about long distance caregiving. As was mentioned, excuse me, I've been a family caregiver pretty much my entire adult life. And this is a picture here of me with my parents who you heard a little bit about. But I want to make sure, I'm sorry, I forgot this slide was here. This is me. This is how you can contact me, and all that information will be in what you'll receive after the conference. Long distance caregiving, the topics that we're going to cover today is number 1, being prepared. Trying to be prepared for any eventuality that comes up when you're a long distance caregiver. We're going to talk about those who are caring for loved ones at home and those who are caring for loved ones in facilities, because it really does make a difference in terms of what your role is and what your challenges are, etc. And then a little bit about hospitalizations, because many of us who live nearby are experiencing sort of a long distance hospitalization experience because of not being able to visit loved ones in the hospital. And then I want to talk a little bit about coping and care for the caregiver in this situation. So before I do, I want to just tell you a little bit about my family caregiving experience. If you can see, this is a picture of my grandmother, Clara. She lived in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I grew up in Southern Ohio and then lived in Columbus, Ohio. So my parents moved from Ohio to Arizona when I was a sophomore in college. So my grandmother, Clara, and my Goyer grandparents, my dad's parents, Genevieve and CV, both lived in Indiana. I was closer. I am the youngest of 4 girls, and I was studying to be a music therapist and working in the field of aging then, and worked in adult daycare centers. Then I worked for the Ohio Department of Aging. and later for AARP. So at this point with my grandparents, I kind of took a more active role. My grandmother, Clara, I would come in and be the respite person. So from a distance, I would come in. My cousins and my aunt and uncle really did the most support for her. She was living in her own home, pretty independent, and she had breast cancer and later bone cancer. She never drove, so I would take her to the grocery store and take her to church and be sort of a socialization, different opportunity for her. With my Goyer grandparents, it was a little bit different because my grandmother had Alzheimer's disease, and granddaddy was her caregiver, her primary caregiver. He was 10 years older than she. So as they were both aging, and he was experiencing this caregiving role that he didn't have any idea how to deal with. She always took care of him, and you probably know what that's like. But he stepped up to the plate and did the best he could. My dad would manage things from a distance, him being in Arizona at this point, and he would help with the finances. Eventually, my grandfather needed some help with managing the finances, so daddy would deal with that. He had the powers of attorney, but I was kind of the person who drove over. It was a 6.5-hour drive, and I drive over pretty frequently, especially as they got older. And I got them started with Meals on Wheels at first. And then I got them home health aid to help with my grandmother's bathing. And eventually they had 24/7 care at home. And that was their wish, was to stay at home. I would talk with the neighbors and make sure they got out and shoveled the snow. Although I remember my grandfather was 95, and a neighbor came out and said, you know, I went out at 7 a.m. to shovel your grandfather's snow, but he was already up and had already done it. So he was really a fighter. My grandparents did run out of money eventually and had to go in a nursing home. There was no Medicaid waiver in Indiana at the time, and they had to go into a nursing facility. And my grandmother lived 4 weeks, and my grandfather died 6 weeks after she did. So our experience there, especially managing the nursing facilities, was extremely difficult. It was even harder than caring for them at home because the communication and trying to be there and make sure they were getting the care. I remember I drove over one time when my grandfather was in a nursing facility after my grandmother died. I walked into the dining room, and my grandfather was sitting at a table. He was the only person in the dining room, and there was a plate in front of him with a cookie on it. It was a hard, crunchy kind of cookie, and he didn't have his teeth in. He had complete dentures, and they hadn't put his teeth in. And you can imagine I was furious. And that's the kind of thing that if I hadn't been there, I wouldn't have known. So we did get my dad's cousins who lived nearby to start visiting, you know, on a regular basis, pretty much a daily basis. And that helped a lot. But it is a huge challenge caring from a distance. Now, in the middle of this, my mom had a stroke. She was only 63. And my dad then became her primary caregiver, as well as his responsibilities with his parents. So I had just started a job at the Department of Aging and had no leave built up, but they had a program where people could donate leave. So I flew across the country, got there to help with my mom in the hospital, and then helped get her into a really good rehab program. Again, I'd been working in the field, so that was kind of important to me to make sure that she got what she was needing. And then my sister came when I left, and we took turns for a while as Daddy was still working full time. I was the chairman of the communication department at ASU, Arizona State University here in Phoenix. And so he was really overwhelmed. So, you know, my role with my parents, again, a little different than with my grandparents, because I would still come in and be the respite person, but my dad was more on the day-to-day involved. And, you know, I over the years, I tried to make sure that my mom got new approaches and new therapies and new things to help her get her out for socializing and shopping and those sorts of things. Now, my dad retired when he was 72, and my mom was not, she did not have any paralysis from the stroke, but she had aphasia, so she had a hard time communicating. But my dad and she traveled. They actually went, you know, internationally. They traveled. I went with them to Scotland, and I traveled with my mom, and then met up with my dad and my uncle and my cousins who were golfing. And My parents lived an incredible quality of life despite these challenges. My dad did all the right things when he retired. He became an AARP volunteer. He got very active. He learned new things. He had responsibilities taking care of mom. He got very involved in his veterans group. In this picture here, they are getting ready to go to a veterans meeting. He was a 10th Mountain Division veteran in World War II. All of these things were really good for my dad cognitively, as well as physically. But nevertheless, the thing we dreaded did happen. Like his mother, my dad developed Alzheimer's disease. And very gradually, we started providing supports over time. Initially, I had moved to Washington, D.C., so I was there. My parents were in Arizona. I would help my dad with, first of all, with things with his health. He would have these episodes that were actually never really diagnosed. It seemed like heart incidents. I can remember one time my sister lived around the corner from them, but he called me in Washington, D.C. when he wasn't feeling well. And I said, okay, Dad, hang up the phone, call 911, then call me back, and managing that from a distance. And it was just so hard. Eventually, he needed some help with finances, the taxes, more, refinancing the house, things like that. And then little by little, I started taking over the finances for him, managing that from a distance. My sister, who lived nearby, would go to all their doctor's appointments with them. I would come in and travel to be here in Arizona as frequently as I could and spend some time helping them in person, giving my sister a break. We managed, but there came a point where we wanted Dad to stop driving. And that was a game changer. He said, we're moving into a senior community. So I flipped my life, and I quit my full-time job, became a consultant. I moved out to Arizona. I found 12 places for my parents to look, to possibilities, and then narrowed it down to 3. They chose one that was just 2 miles from their house. So I moved back into their house, which is where I am today. And they moved into the senior community down the road. And they danced in the living room once we got it all set up, and then I knew they were going to be okay. But over time, for about 3 years, they lived there, and I was there every day when I was in town, and I travel a lot for my work, so I wasn't always here. So I was kind of being both an in-person caregiver and a long-distance caregiver, because when I was out of town, I was still managing their healthcare and their services and all of the things that they needed. Eventually, though, my mom had a catastrophic fall and fractured her spine. She learned to walk again, but with a walker, and was very fragile. My dad's dementia started increasing, and they needed 24-hour care. So I moved them in the house with me, moved them back in their house. And they were happy to be able to do that. In the middle of all that, my oldest sister, who lived in Maryland, was sick with Cushing disease. So here I was put again in a long distance caregiving situation. I was her power of attorney. She had a good support system of friends there, but no family. And she, when she had hospitalizations, I needed to go and be there. She had complications. It was a lot of being in Arizona with my parents, dealing with the day-to-day, and eventually with the live-in care, and then traveling to Washington, D.C. for work, and then driving over to Maryland to check on my sister and get her what she needed. It was a lot. And so, as you can see, I've had lots of different long-distance caregiving roles, as well as live-in and in-person. As was mentioned, my mom passed away a year after they moved in with us, and my sister passed away a year after she did. And so I was managing her estate, getting her house emptied out and sold, while still caring for my dad. My dad just passed away 2 years ago, so he lived with me 6 years. He was amazing, and I'm going to play a little video of him later for you. So this just gives you one caregiver snapshot of various long-distance caregiving responsibilities, and then changing over time. I'm sure so many of you can identify with various parts. The whole point is that we're all on a spectrum, and our caregiving roles change over time, and our situations are constantly changing, and there are a lot of challenges. So I want to do a quick poll for all of you and see what your stories are. If Natalie can, there's the poll. So what you do is you just, you tap on or click on the choice that makes the most sense for you. So where do those you're caring for live is what I'm trying to find out. Do they live in their own homes but in another state? Do they live in their own homes and they're more than an hour away, but they're in the same state? They live in the same state you're living in. Or do they live nearby in their own homes? Or do they live in a long-term care facility, either a nursing home, an assisted living, a group home, etc., either nearby or at a distance? So click on the one that makes the most sense for you, and then we will get a summary and get a sense of where all of you are. And Natalie, when you think you've got enough responses, you can just show the results of the poll. One of the reasons I like to do this is to get a sense of where you are. In the days of COVID-19, many of us that would not consider ourselves long-distance caregivers are kind of in that situation now where we are. And oh, okay, here we've got our results. Got to get my glasses so I can read them. Okay. Looks like the largest response was they live in their own homes but in another state. Okay. And then we had, I'm trying to make my glasses so I can see, a kind of a tie between they live nearby in their own homes or they live in a long-term care facility. And then a slightly smaller amount live in the same state. So a lot of you are dealing with people who are really living at a distance, but in their own homes. And that tends to be the case for many caregivers. So I'm going to talk with you about how to be prepared for the various eventualities that might come up when you're caregiving. Now, we just did our poll. This is data from the new AARP and National Alliance for Caregiving study, Caregiving in the US. And it indicates that, so you can see there, the majority of people live in their own home, those that we're caring for. And then, or they live in the household of the caregiver who's caring for them. Fewer live in facilities. But as I said, often you have more challenges when they're in facilities. About 11% of all caregivers live more than an hour away. So, I'm sorry, their care recipients live more than an hour away. So when you think about that, you're fitting right in really with the national trends. The first thing to talk about is family discussions. What are the things that you've talked about to be prepared for? What are your loved ones' wishes and plans? Do they have end-of-life wishes? Do they have their estate planning done? Have you talked about the quality of life? What's important to them in their life? Now, these are true things that you need to talk about regardless of where your loved one lives. But at a distance, we often skip these things because we're not seeing them on a regular basis, talking to them on a daily basis, unless you're calling every day. But even so, you don't necessarily think about it. So I like to really remind long-distance caregivers, find out where things stand in all these areas, the finances, their living situation. You need to talk about, okay, right now you live at home. What if this changes or that changes? Where will you want to live? What are the legal issues that you need to deal with? And that includes advanced directives and estate planning, wills, all of that. Your health situation. It's hard when you're not with a person to keep track of everything that's going on. And it's especially hard right now when you can't even just travel periodically necessarily to be with your loved ones. It's a big challenge. And then you need to talk about what's the support system. From a distance, I'm going to talk a little bit about your local caregiving team and who are the current supports in their lives. Are they involved with their church or their faith community? Do they have neighbors who help them out? Figure out what are their current supports, and then what are their priorities? Is it their top priority to stay in their home where they are, or is it their top priority to be closer to family? So try to figure out what those things are. Now, I have down here at the bottom some of my top tips in terms of these discussions. These can be difficult discussions, no doubt about it. Not easy to bring some of these things up, and especially on the phone, right? But you want to think about the best approach. You know your loved one more than most people do. So you know what works for them. What is the best way to talk about it? Is it bringing out, say, oh, I saw this webinar the other day and we were talking about estate planning. Have you got your estate planning done? I think I need to work on mine. And another approach is to talk about what you've done and draw it in from there. You might talk about an article you read or a story or something that happened to a friend of yours. Do your homework ahead of time. If you're talking about these various issues, what are the options? If you want to talk about driving, then what are the alternate transportations that are available? Have that available, that information, when you have the conversation. So do the homework ahead of time. Talk about who should be part of the conversation. If there is a family member or a friend or the attorney, the accountant, someone who your loved one especially trusts and listens to, that person should be part of the conversation. I know my grandmother, whenever my uncle was a health teacher, he was a basketball coach in Indiana, and he was also a health teacher, a high school health teacher. And so because of that, my grandmother wanted him part of all her health conversations. And he would say, I don't know, he was not a doctor, but it didn't matter. That was important to her. When is it best time to have the conversation? I know, some people are morning people, sometimes are evening people. Is it good to have these conversations over the holidays or not? Think about when and then where. If possible, I always encourage having these conversations in person. Right now, with COVID-19, that's a challenge. So think about the best way to handle that as well. Now, I'm going to delve into a few of these topics. I can't cover everything because we just don't have enough time, but I want to delve into some of them that I think are particularly important for long-distance caregivers. First of all, the advance directives. When you're at a distance, my sister, for example, when she passed away, she had sent me a copy of her will, but I hadn't really looked closely at it, and she hadn't signed it. And so it was not valid. Now I had to go through her house and find an earlier copy of her will, which thankfully wasn't very different, that she had signed. If I hadn't been so caught up with my parents, I probably would have been more on top of that. But those are the kinds of things you want to have at your fingertips at any given time. It's so much easier to get these things done long before you need them. So I've listed here a few of the different types of things. We've got some great information on the AARP website about a physician's orders for treatment, the do not resuscitate DNR. 5 Wishes is a great resource. If you Google 5 Wishes, they're a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more information about your advance directives that you can share. You can say if you want music played when you're dying, or you can say the important things that are important to you, to have your animals with you, or any kind of specifics like that as well. Medical information. You're going to be managing medical issues from a distance if you're a long distance caregiver. So it's so important to keep up to date on these things. The medication list and alert allergies, medical history, if you can write that up, whether you're an in-person or a long distance caregiver, how many times do you have to fill out these forms? And so I finally created a medical history for both of my parents with all of those details that I could take with me or I could easily transfer. All of their doctors and their local healthcare providers, insurance cards, emergency contacts in the local area. One of the things that caregivers are doing, that even some hospitals are actually reaching out in their communities right now with COVID-19 and having older adults put their advance directives, their powers of attorney in their systems ahead of time, even when they're not hospitalized, so that it's in that hospital's system. So find out if you can do that so that you wouldn't be worrying if your loved one got sent to the hospital, do they have that information with them? If not, you should always have print copies ready. And even if you're not there, if you can print everything out, put it in I always put mine in a red folder because it's easy to find. You can put it in a bag by the door. You can do something to make sure that anyone who is taking them to the hospital can grab that folder with all of the information. Electronic copies for team members is really helpful too. So I had copies of all of these documentations that I could access on my phone, on my computer, on my tablet. I use Evernote for notes. I use Dropbox so that I can access anywhere from the internet. And again, that's a whole nother workshop on those kinds of technologies, but find ways so that it's so much easier. I even have an app on my phone that I can fax from and on my computer. So if some hospitals, doctors, they only accept fax, they don't accept email. So you have to be able to fax them. And now you can do that so much more easily from home. So these are just tip of the iceberg, some of the things that you need to think about. Now you need to build a team, especially when you're at a distance. And the whole point is that it's not all on you. And you know how it can feel so helpless being at a distance. You just feel like there's only so much I can do. Well, that's true. There is only so much you can do. So think about these things. If you're like that incident when my dad called me and I was in Washington, D.C. and he was in Arizona, I couldn't call 911 for him. If I called 911, I would get DC 911. So thankfully he was okay enough to hang up and call 911 himself. But you need to find out, either have a service that does that, or is there a neighbor you can call? Is there someone in the local area? And you can also call the local police department, fire department, and find out what the procedure would be if there is some other way for you to contact emergency services when your loved one needs them. Frequent contact is really important for everyone. And when you're not there, you need to enlist others to do so. So you can have others who are at a distance. You can have other team members who are at a distance who can send mail and write messages and email and phone calls. Anyone can do video chats these days. And then if you could have local people, it might be friends, neighbors, their faith community members, it might be services, to do window visits, to do parking lot parades, to do porch visits, regardless of where your loved ones live. Try to set up other people to be that touch point. I know we're all so isolated right now, and I can tell you that just seeing someone, it really gives me a lift, and I think that's important for everyone. Shopping is a big one. So, making sure that they get their groceries. There are services that can do that for you. Again, another kind of one of the advantages of the pandemic right now is that everyone's learning about delivery services, and it's becoming much more normal to do that and to use them. So how can you use that to your advantage for your loved ones? Or can you get friends to do that? I know a lot of older people who are isolated in their homes who have neighbors who are just offering. And I'm going to give you some information about where you can find a local mutual aid group in your loved one's community who might be willing to do that shopping and not charge them the extra fee and not ask for a tip. Also, their home. If they're living in their home, which more of you are, more of your loved ones are, you need to look at who's keeping up the home, who's taking care of the yard, who's bringing in their mail, who's checking on their porch because they have a delivery. You know, that's one of the ways that neighbors can be so helpful. And many people want to help, they just don't know how to help. They need to be asked and given something specific, a specific role to play. Transportation is another one. And we often have friends and neighbors who can step in sometimes with that. You also need professional help. So going beyond your family, your friends, your neighbors, one of the best resources for a long distance caregiver is the Elder Care Locator. And that's just at eldercare.acl.gov. And I have a whole handout for you with clickable links for a lot of resources that I'm going to be talking about. So don't worry too much about writing down these addresses. The handout will be mailed to you or emailed to you. But the Elder Care Locator, you can put in your zip code or your city and state and get a list of the Area Agency on Aging, the Aging and Disabilities Resource Center, the State Unit on Aging, the local long-term care ombudsman. All of these important folks where your loved ones live. You may know the lay of the land where you are, but not in their community. So this is a really important resource. You need to get assessments and often can't travel there to check and see how your loved ones are doing and what they need. Check with the Area Agency on Aging and the ADRC. There are local disability and aging focused organizations, that often do these assessments, case management organizations. The VA, if your loved ones are veterans, we had a huge amount of support from the VA for my dad. And if your loved ones are veterans, you can check in with the veteran healthcare system, see what kind of assessment, in-home assessment you might get about how they're doing and what supports they need. And also you can get an occupational therapist or a physical therapist to evaluate the home for safety. Those are just some of the people who can help. You can also get local care managers. And with long distance caregiving, this is becoming a more and more valuable and highly used service. There are people who are trained to be care managers, people who've worked in the field, people who know what the local resources are. You can work with the Area Agency on Aging and find out if they have that type of service or if they can refer you. Medicaid, if your loved one's on Medicaid, they should have a case manager. If they're in the VA health system, they should have a case manager or a social worker who can help out with this. And then there are geriatric care managers who are often sometimes called aging life care experts. And the Aging Life Care Association has a finder, like a search mechanism on their website where you can put in, again, your zip code or your city and state and find a local care manager. I know a lot of caregivers who have someone like this. When I was traveling so much, I had a local care manager who I made sure had up-to-date copies of my parents' medication lists, of their medical history, their insurance cards, all of their key information in case they had a hospitalization and I was out of town. And I never had to use her for that. She helped me a couple other times when I was sick and couldn't take care of my parents and I needed somebody to come in and help. She helped me manage that. But I felt so much better knowing I had her. I knew that she could step in and get to the hospital or get to the facility wherever my parents were quickly. So think about obtaining the services of a geriatric care manager. Finding paid caregivers. When you're at a distance and can't provide the care yourself, you may be more likely to hire paid caregivers. And this is one of the reasons why long distance caregivers tend to spend more money than in-person caregivers. It seems it's an interesting phenomenon, really, and part of that is because they may be paying for the care that they can't be providing themselves. They're also paying for travel and other expenses. And local agencies can be found using the Community Resource Finder, and that's just communityresourcefinder.org. It's a resource that AARP works with the Alzheimer's Association on, and it does include a lot of different services that are not related to Alzheimer's disease, but it does also have a section on the Alzheimer's programs. So you can find local agencies. You can also find housing and other alternatives in your loved one's local area. Online matching services like care.com or CareLinks, where you can hire a caregiver directly, or CareLinks is kind of a hybrid version where they help take care of paying the person and the taxes. If you hire someone directly, be sure to be aware that if they work more than a certain number of hours, you need to be paying employer taxes and they need to pay employee taxes. I did this a lot. I hired a lot of caregivers to help care with my parents here in the home. And because I was working full time, my sister came from Ohio and helped. But we still had paid caregivers. And I used a payroll service to pay them so that all the taxes were taken care of and up to date. The Area Agency on Aging is another good resource, or other local agencies like AGE who can give you referrals. Sometimes they have lists of people. It really varies depending on the Area Agency on Aging. But you can also ask around. Sometimes word of mouth is the best way to get a good caregiver who's trustworthy. You know someone who's had a good experience with them. So ask around. Always, always, always background checks You have to get the background checks. If you hire directly, some of the services like care.com, they have the ability to get a background check through the website. Get references, talk with them. You have to be prepared to train them. That's the tricky part when you're at a distance. They don't know your loved ones. Who's going to come in there and familiarize them and make sure they know what they need to do? So ideally, in a long distance caregiving situation, if you're hiring a caregiver, you go for a visit during that time and you're there, you see how they interact. I always start people on a trial period and see how it's going. And, I've had people come and go, and I've had people not show up. And, those are the things that you deal with when you're having paid caregivers in the home. But eventually you can usually find someone who's really great. You need to have someone to monitor their care though. When you're not there, who's going to stop in unannounced now and then and see what's happening in the home, make sure that care is really being provided what you expect. So again, that's a role a geriatric care manager could do, a paid caregiver. I had a concierge who helped me with a variety of things, and she would drop in and just say hi and see my parents and then report back to me. You have to reassess everything about your loved ones from a distance. It's not easy, but be sure to monitor their mental health and their emotions. Are you seeing anxiety, depression? A lot of phone conversations probably. So reflective listening, hearing what they're saying. It's often hard when you're at a distance to really get a sense of, are they just complaining or are there real problems going on? Doesn't really matter in some ways. You need to have compassion and listen and empathy and feedback to them and validate whatever it is that they're feeling. You need to track their physical health. Again, doing that without seeing them is hard. Video chat really helps that in some ways, because you can also monitor their personal care. Have they not washed their hair in days? Are they wearing the same clothes that they've been wearing for the past 2 weeks? Are they not? Are their clothes dirty? Are they not doing their laundry and getting clean clothes? One of the ways to monitor their meals and their eating habits is to call at mealtime. It's a social activity eating, and you can eat your meals together, but on the phone or on the video. And then you can kind of see what they're eating and how much they're eating. You can also try to get an idea of their sleep, really talking about that and asking about that. It's actually a huge factor in terms of fall prevention and all kinds of health issues. And then, the functioning. You need to see, how are their routines going? Are they taking care of their home and yard? What are their hobbies and interests? Are they keeping up with things? AARP has a really great guide called Prepare to Care that goes through all of these steps, all the conversations you need to have. We talk about the finances and building the care team and everything. It's a free guide, and this is how you get it. Again, we'll be sending you this information. It has a bunch of different versions. It is available in Spanish and Chinese. We have a military guide that's very helpful as well. So I really urge you to get a copy of this. You can go on the website and download it, or you can order a print copy. And these are things that you can go back to over and over and over again during your caregiving journey. AARP also has a caregiving website. So we have it available in English and Spanish, and cover every bit of all the topics I'm going to talk about today, from the financial and legal to the medical care, caring for people at home, nursing homes, taking care of yourself and your life balance, everything you can think of. And we also have a call-in line where you can actually talk to a live person and say, I need help with this, or I need help with that. And I work closely with those agents actually, and help make sure that they're there to provide you with the resources that you need. I mentioned that AARP has special information for veterans, and I can't, reiterate enough that if your loved one is a veteran, please take advantage of the services. The VA can be a challenge. It's large. It's a bureaucracy. There's lots of layers. It can be frustrating sometimes. It was for me, but it was also wonderful. Incredible supports. I don't know how we could have cared for my dad without the VA. We have this special military caregivers guide that outlines some of the special resources available for veterans, as well as this website, aarp.org/veterans. Okay, so the next part I want to talk about, all of those things were things that are important for all long distance caregivers. I want to go into a little more detail about if your loved ones are living at home. And then I'll talk a little bit about nursing facilities. So if your loved ones are living at home, you're challenged, especially right now, with keeping them active and having cognitive stimulation and connections and being physically active. So these are just some of the things that I see as part of our caregiving role. It's not just about healthcare. We also need to figure out how to have visits, and I talked about how your team can help with that, but also how you can figure out video chats and that sort of thing. They have to have fun and laughter. That's part of a well-rounded life. So find ways to exercise with them, and movies. My sister's in California, and my other sister lives next door to me. So we get on video, we do FaceTime on our phones, or we do Zoom, and we watch TV shows and movies together. And she's watching there and we're watching here, but we're kind of watching them together, and we just mute our phones. And then if we want to say something, we unmute. It's company, and it's more stimulating that way. So get creative about ways that you can have fun with your loved ones. Technology, again, it's helpful if you if your loved one isn't used to using technology. Get a device, set it up, and send it to them already all set up. That's one thing you can do. You're going to have to provide help, but you can also send them videos. And I'm finding that AARP has created a lot of really simple videos, like how to use Zoom, and people are sending them to their loved ones. And sometimes that's really helpful because they can watch it over and over and over again. But you can also, get them a smart TV that you can use. They've got, most people have some type of a smartphone now. Many older adults don't. My aunt and uncle in Indiana, I just spent, on Saturday, I was on the phone with my aunt for an hour and a half. I talked to her while I did my house cleaning. And it was a great break for her. They're very isolated. They haven't been going out at all. My cousin goes over every day, but just real quickly, and they're trying not to have too much in-person interaction. And so we just chatted, and it was just, I could tell it was a big lift for her. I have a picture here, a friend of mine, her father, he's in the middle in the center section on the left. Calvin, it was his birthday, and it was, I think, his 75th birthday. And so his daughter, my friend, got a bunch of us to do a Zoom, and it was a surprise Zoom birthday party for him. And he loved it. And it was he thought he was just Zooming with her, and then we all joined. So those are things that, you can do. I know her dad. I've met him a couple times. I don't know him really well, but it was fun. I made a sign. I put on a silly hat. Anything you can do to use technology to connect, but also encourage them to have purposeful activity. Projects, organizing closets, emptying out drawers, scrapbooking, going through photographs. A lot of people are doing that right now. Doing some gardening, doing jigsaw puzzles, encouraging any kind of activity can be really helpful. This is an app that we used just recently in my family called House Party. And again, I'm not endorsing this app or pushing this app or anything. There are quite a few things available, but this one was especially fun. It's kind of like a Zoom. You can see each other's faces, but it has games you can play together. So on the left, we did trivia games for my nephew's birthday, and we had people all over the country on, and they ask all kinds of different topics of questions, and it was just fun to not just see each other and talk, but also do something interactive. And that's, again, cognitively stimulating for your loved ones as well. My allergist was telling me that he's been playing bridge with his father. My allergist is here. His father lives in California, and he loves to play bridge. So he and his brother, and let's see, there's 4 people on there. Another family member, I think. There's a website where you can play bridge online. And so he got the website up, then he got his father set up with a tablet so they can see each other while they're playing. And I thought that was really creative, and his father's in his 90s, but he loves to play bridge, and that's helping him stay cognitively stimulated. Another issue when your loved one lives at home is home safety. And AARP has this really incredible guide, home fit guide, soon to be updated. And it goes through every room of the house. It helps you think about what are the things you need to be looking for and evaluate the home. So even though you're at a distance, these are things to be thinking about. And I won't go into it deeply, but get rid of the throw rugs. Where is the laundry located? Do we need to put the bedroom on the first floor? How is the lighting? Are there grab bars, et cetera, et cetera. Technology, speaking of which, is a great help for long-distance caregivers. It's really changed the long-distance caregiving experience. I wish I'd had these things available when I was caring for my grandparents. Medical alert is usually the first thing that people ask me about. It's kind of one of the first things that you do when your loved one starts to need help. So an emergency response system, and there are so many now. They're waterproof, they have GPS, they have fall detection. You can determine who's contacted if you want to be contacted first before 911 or not. And make sure you get one that does not have a contract. You should be able to stop this service at any time. I wrote a whole column about all the different features on AARP, and that'll be one of the links that you'll get. The technology can have opportunity to check in. There are some integrated systems that have two-way communication where you may or may not have a video that you can see the person, but it has an audio that can come on. My boyfriend has this for his mother. And so we can go in on an app and say, hey mom, how you doing? And then it goes on a loudspeaker in her house. She doesn't even have to pick up the phone. And if she doesn't answer, or if he was concerned she had fallen or something, he'd get on there and say, Mom, are you okay? And if she doesn't respond, then know why. There are also movement monitors where you can get a notification. Mom was active in the living room. Mom was active in the bathroom. You don't have to see them, but they're moving around and kind of doing their normal routine. And so that can be very helpful and reassuring as well. You can also get motion sensor. I had motion sensors in the hallway here with my dad was with me that I could get a notification sound that he was up and about. You can have video cameras. Some of the video cameras have two-way notifications. We had that for communication when I was traveling away and my dad was here at home. The video camera that we could watch and make sure if he was getting out of his chair. I could also check that from a distance on my phone or my tablet and talk to him, and he could talk back to me. So these things there's so much available and it's constantly changing. So I do urge you to keep an eye on the AARP website. We have lots of good information and new things coming up all the time. But also think about creatively. It doesn't have to be a super expensive system to work. Maybe you need one or two items that you can get at the local hardware store. This was a video camera we had in my dad's bedroom. And again, so I could see him sleeping. And even when I was away traveling, I would just like to look at that and see that he was sleeping, and then I could go to sleep and rest easy. Medications are another big issue, and one of the other issues that come up a lot when people are living in their own homes. It's one of the medical alerts, and the taking medications and the driving are kind of the big ones. So services, you can get services to fill the pill box. The pharmacies, a lot of the pharmacies, I know CVS and Walgreens and some of these pharmacies actually offer services now. Well, they will dispense in this one picture that you pull out a little packet and it has that dose of medication in it. That can be useful, but again, these all options depend on what your loved ones, what they take. Do they take the same pills 3 times a day? Do they take different pills in the morning and the night? So you have to kind of make sure that you deal with that. You can have a home health nurse come and fill the pill boxes and actually administer the medications, or you can have privately paid caregivers that do that. You can get pill organizers. You can even have a smart speaker that says, it's time to take your medication. You can program it to do that. But there are a lot of smart pill organizers and dispensers, and here's just a smattering of them. Up in the upper left here, that was a pill organizer I used for my parents. And we always had a caregiver with them though, to know that to give them to them. There are smart pill boxes that have alarms on them that say, it's time to take your medication. There are some that will actually notify you, the caregiver, that the medication has been taken. These are dispensers. These, you put the medications in, and then at an appointed time, it dispenses the correct medication for that time. And there are a lot of those now coming on the market, and a real variety of how those are used. Again, you might have to pay someone to fill the dispenser or the pill organizer, but these dispensers can help make sure that they're getting the right ones at the right time. Now, if you have a challenge of them having the pills but not taking them, that's when it becomes more complicated, and you tend to need a live person to help. Meals, shopping, and supplies. You can arrange, as I mentioned, one of the first things I did for my grandparents was get Meals on Wheels for them. You can arrange for meal delivery or preparation. A lot of people are using the services where the meal is delivered and then the person cooks it. So if your loved one is still cooking but not getting through going out and going to the grocery store, they might enjoy that. Again, I mentioned call during meal times. Eating is a social activity for so many people, and people will eat more when they have that socialization. You can do video or phone call. Help your loved ones, and especially right now with COVID, help them do a weekly inventory. What are you getting low on? What do you need? My boyfriend did this a lot with his mom, who's in her 90s, and before COVID was driving and was, pretty active, doing her own shopping for the grocery, etc. And then she was stuck at home, and he would say, "Do you need anything?" And she'd say, "No, I'm fine." He'd say, "Well, how about coffee? Well, how about potatoes? How about?" And she'd say, "Oh yeah, I do need that." So proactively doing an inventory can be really helpful. You can find grocery lists even online to give them. Purchase and delivery, how are the groceries being purchased? Are they being delivered? Who can get them in the house? Is your loved one capable of doing that? Can a neighbor help with that? And always a backup plan when things don't get delivered. The same is true with your medications, to make sure that they know that they have enough medications going forward. Other issues that come up are banking, going to the library, any of these activities that your loved one is dealing with. You can help them. Again, technology is a huge help, even with banking. The libraries sometimes have delivery services. So looking for what's available in their community. COVID-19 has added some additional complications. Telehealth is one of the things that has become more common. So I view this in a positive way, because we're hopeful that it will be approved going forward even after the pandemic is over. And it is making a huge difference for a lot of people to not have to get people out of the house for whom it's very difficult. And if you're at a distance, you can be on those telehealth calls. For the most part, the doctors are open to that. My sister, who lives next door, has been ill for 9 months with a chronic infection we can't get rid of. I can't go in the doctor's offices with her anymore, but I am able to call in for her appointments, and I'm able to sometimes video in. So those are things that can be really helpful. We have to keep reminding our loved ones about the safety precautions. Don't let up, don't let up, don't let up. This is so important, and it's going to continue to be important for a while. You need to think about, if you get sick, who's going to keep your loved ones informed? Since they're not local, sometimes people forget about that. So if you get sick, who's your caregiver who's going to let them know how things are going? Because they're going to be worried about you. If they get sick, all the preparations I talked about in terms of the legal papers, et cetera, the medication lists, all of that being available. How are you going to communicate with the hospital? Who's going to care for pets in the home and communicate with the care team? So put together a plan for that. And how you're going to manage all of those aspects, again, from a distance. AARP has a lot of great COVID-19 resources for you available on the website as well at aarp.org/coronavirus. And we have that a lot available in Spanish as well. Articles, we are doing very regular teletown halls. We have a lot of videos, tools to help you through this time. So if you're looking for sort of the latest, and especially the latest as how it affects caregiving, check out the website. We also have created a couple of neat things. AARP, in response to the pandemic, created AARP Community Connections. And if your loved one's living in the community, I mentioned earlier, there might be a mutual aid group, people, just friends and neighbors, people they don't know who are willing to volunteer right now and help out, who might deliver groceries or cut the grass or do, a variety of things. And you can go to arpcommunityconnections.org and you can find a local listing of these types of groups. You can put in your zip code, or your city and town, and find out what's local where your loved ones are. And you might be surprised at what you can find and what people are doing. It's just amazing how people are stepping up. The other thing that AARP created was AARP Friendly Voices. And if your loved ones, especially if they're living in their own home and they're isolated, it's not all on you to be the only person they're talking to. You can sign them up for an AARP Friendly Voices call. Volunteers are trained to call isolated people and talk with them and just chat. It's just a friendly voice. And they do have some training, so they know how to screen if they think there's a problem and where to pass on that information. But check that out. You can get them signed up for that. And I'm hearing lots of great feedback. People are so grateful to get these calls and they're really enjoying it. AARP also has a number of caregiving books. My book, Juggling Life, Work, and Caregiving. The checklist for family caregivers covers a lot of these legal issues that are helpful to you. And we have a number of other really great books, caregiving books. And also that community resource finder that I mentioned earlier, where you can look up, there's a whole section about care at home, but also community programs and housing options and medical support, dementia support, AARP activities, etc. Again, you'll get a handout with all of these links. AARP does have a whole section in the caregiving part of the website about caring at home. So this is for you if you're caring for someone who lives in their own home. And we cover so many, as you can see, so many different topics: how to keep people engaged, how to find and hire a caregiver, dealing with dementia, so many great topics there. So I want to do one other quick poll before we move on. And I don't have much more time, so let's get this poll up real quick. I'm just curious how you're interacting with your loved ones. Are you visiting, or you're not visiting during the pandemic? I mean, again, this is where it's kind of made some of us long distance caregivers who live nearby because you're not actually doing in-person visits. So are you visiting them right now? You're not visiting them right now. Some people are visiting them, providing care. You've decided this is the risk we're going to take. We're the only people we're interacting with. And then others are connecting in video chats and phone calls. And then some caregivers are traveling to do window visits or outside visits and porch visits. Some of the facilities are even allowing in-person visits now. So think about, I'm curious about where you are, and this is a constantly changing situation. I understand that. So Natalie, when you think you've had enough responses, go ahead and pop that up and let us know where people stand. So again, my glasses. So the majority of you are connecting with them periodically from a distance. Yeah. Using video chats and phone calls. So that's the situation for a lot of you. And then some of you are also visiting them in their homes on a limited basis, but kind of keeping your distance. That's you're the folks who this is kind of, even if they don't live at a distance, just put them into a sort of a long distance situation. Now, if your loved ones are living in a facility, I want to add just a few additional things to think about. Your role, if your loved ones are living in a facility, as a caregiver, our role is to advocate for our loved ones always. But if they're living in a facility, that's a huge part of your role. And especially when you can't visit right now and you feel so helpless, you can advocate for them. You can ask questions and keep asking those questions. Make sure you get responses. And if you don't have clear responses, keep asking. You need to try and have regular communication with the facility about their health, their cognitive status, their mental health status, what's going on in the facility. Are things changing? Do they have the staffing levels that they are expected to have? Is the quality of care the same and the consistency? Are therapies and activities happening? You know, with COVID-19, we've had some pretty creative folks trying to keep activities going in these facilities, but many of our loved ones are pretty much stuck in their rooms. So really finding out and asking questions about things. Yes, sometimes it takes a little pressure to help them then step up and do things, but that's your job, you know, is to make sure your loved ones are getting what they need. AARP has put together these 6 questions to ask if your loved ones live in a nursing home. Has anybody tested positive? We have to keep asking this question. Some nursing homes are reporting this, some are not. So keep asking that question. What is the nursing home doing to prevent infections? What are the safety precautions that they're taking? Are they isolating people who are sick from those who are not? Do they have all the proper personal protective equipment they need? Do they have face masks and shields and gowns, and what do they need? And making sure the staff are trained on how to use it. I had a caregiver tell me yesterday that she was doing a window visit with her husband, and she saw a staff person walk into the facility, you know, no mask, you know, it just made her really question, you know, the safety. So she was talking with the administrators about it. How are they helping patients communicate? This has been a huge challenge, and AARP is doing a lot of advocacy to try and make sure they at least have video chat capabilities. How are they keeping the residents informed? A lot of facilities have been sending weekly emails, but many don't. So find out and ask for that. You deserve to have that. Is the nursing home fully staffed? Again, I mentioned sometimes they've been laying people off. Are they fully staffed? Are people calling in sick? You know, really just trying to get a clear view of what's going on. If you can't get good information, you feel like you're not getting your questions answered, start with the staff, you know, the direct care worker, the social worker, the nursing director, and the administrator. Try to get answers that way. If there's a family council, be sure that you're involved in it. And if there isn't one, you can start one. All of the families of the residents should be able to have a way to meet on Zoom and to share concerns and share them with the administration. AARP is working very diligently at the state level in all the states on these nursing home issues, and you can contact the state office where your loved ones live. And then the long-term care ombudsman is really one of your great resources. AARP has this site, again, a link that we'll be sending you, where you can look up the long-term care ombudsman in every state. Now, I am hearing from a lot of people that their long-term care ombudsmans are not allowed to go in the facilities right now. And it depends on where you are. It really varies. If that's the case, you need to push and advocate for them to be able to get in the state into the facilities. As you saw the video in the beginning from Jessica in AARP Texas, AARP is working really hard to improve that. COVID-19 does make things complicated, just as when your loved ones are living at home. Think about what's your plan if they get sick or if you get sick. Who are the primary contacts? Who's going to notify you? Talk to the facility. If my loved one gets sick and you send her to the hospital, how am I going to know? Are you going to notify me? I want to be notified immediately. Many people I'm hearing don't know for several days that their loved ones are even in the hospital. You need to be demanding that you are kept informed. If you get sick, you need to make sure that the facility has someone else to be in contact with. Because if you're sick, who's going to be playing that role? Again, you could have a paid person like a geriatric care manager, a family member, a friend, someone that can kind of close that loop if you're not available. Visiting and the connections, I've talked a little bit about this already in terms of the in-person visits, the window visits. This picture is a caregiver who I know who sent me this, who goes to visit her husband, but she's a local caregiver, not a long-distance caregiver. So some people, I am hearing of people traveling to go and visit their loved ones, and even if it's a window visit, they're still doing that if they can drive. But otherwise, we need to really try to rely on these video chats. Packages, some facilities will accept them, some won't. So find out what the policies are around that. Be aware that the CDC does have recommendations around compassionate care, and that includes end-of-life care, but it's not limited just to end-of-life care. And I have heard from some caregivers whose loved ones have severe dementia that they are used to them coming in and helping care for them every day. I've heard of some caregivers who have convinced the facilities to allow them to continue to do that. The same for hospitals. Some hospitals are being really good about this, others not so much. So it might be helpful for you to find out ahead of time what those policies are before you're in a crisis. If you think about bringing your loved ones home, these are some of the things to think about. And because I get a lot of caregivers asking, my loved one's in a facility, I live at a distance, or even if I live nearby, should I bring them home? What can I do? Just keep these things in mind. Really evaluate before you make the decision. It might be the best thing to do, but it might not be. So think about, the logistics, the travel, their health conditions. Where will you get help? Can you get help set up in the home? What the care needs are, what the risks are around changing their routines. People with dementia, sometimes they think that would make it harder. For others, it doesn't. Find out if they can return back to their facility. If they do come and stay with you for a while. So just really think about the details of this. Again, for some it's the right decision, for others it's not. AARP has a great deal of nursing home information for you at aarp.org/nursinghomes. And we have, again, in Spanish, but we are constantly updating this information. Again, I said AARP, this is a huge priority for AARP right now because we have had such high deaths in the nursing homes. The nursing homes, many do not have the PPE that they need, the personal protective equipment. And we are also trying to advocate for the families who are trying to visit, who need to visit, whose loved ones need them. Real quickly, in the hospital, a lot of the similar things might apply as with the facility, but try to think through how are you going to communicate? I've heard from a lot of caregivers whose loved ones are in the hospital, they can't visit, that the charge nurse is the person that they get the most information from. They rarely get to talk to the doctor. So finding out who that nurse is on shift today, who's the person, when's the best time to call, when are they doing their rounds, any information like that you can get to help make their jobs easier, but also get the information that you need. You should request to talk to the doctors though, and so many doctors are working so hard and they're trying to contact families, but many of them are so caught up that it is hard to get information. The communications, I know at one hospital, for example, in Columbus, Ohio, that they actually set up a whole system where loved ones can drop off a device. It's cleaned by the folks at the hospital. It's registered by the security folks so that they can track it and make sure it doesn't get stolen. And then they are given to the patients during the day and locked up at night, and to help facilitate video communications with their families and their loved ones. So find out how that might work. Again, have those legal documents in place. Talk about how decisions will be made. Will they call you before things happen since you can't be there? And again, the compassionate care guidance does apply to hospitals as well. And I have known of some people who've been able to go in and help a loved one who has aphasia, who has a stroke, who has dementia. So ask, never hesitate to ask. Last but not least, coping. This is hard on you. There are some people who feel like long distance caregiving isn't as stressful because you're not there all the time. And the truth is, it's just as stressful. In some ways, it's more stressful because you do have that constant wondering what's going on, that not being sure exactly how your loved one's doing, what's really going on with them. And so you may have worries, guilt. A lot of guilt goes with long distance caregiving because you're not there. A lot of emotions going up and down, a lot of stress. Acknowledge those feelings. I always say, you know what, let it be. And sometimes if you're feeling sad, stressed, just set a time limit on. I'm going to feel sorry for myself for the weekend because I'm so stressed out about this situation with my parent who lives at a distance. But it's also really important to note that it's unpredictable. So we can't control everything. And from a distance, it's even harder to control everything. That doesn't mean don't do anything. It just means try to be realistic about what you can and can't do. Focus on what you can do. You can advocate for your loved ones. You can get services set up. You can do that preparation work. If you're feeling guilty, think about it. Is it guilt or is it concern? Really try to get down to the bottom of what that guilt feeling is. Is it, I wish I could be there? That's not really guilt. If you can't be there, you can't be there. Right now, you have a lot more limitations on what you can and can't do. So think about it that way and try to identify what the feelings really are and channel them into making connections, finding solutions, ensuring the quality of care, advocating for your loved ones. So digging down deep in and seeing where those feelings are coming from. It's helpful to connect with other caregivers. There's so many people going through what you're going through, and combat your own isolation. We're all isolated right now in some way. We don't have our normal lives, most of us, of what we think of as normal. So you're feeling that as well as the caregiving stress. You may have even a greater financial stress than local caregivers because of all of the challenges. My philosophy of taking care of myself came when I went to the gas station and my car was almost out of gas. And this was while I was caregiving for both my parents and my sister. And I was so burnt out, like I had forgotten to get gas. And I was hoping I'd make it. And I made it to the gas station and I filled up the tank. And as I pulled out of the gas station, I thought, it's so interesting. The car actually runs better on a full tank of gas. Well, duh, right? But that was my aha moment, because I realized I was expecting myself to run just as efficiently on empty all the time. And I started thinking of taking care of myself as practical, not being selfish. It's just something I have to do. You have to put in order to give out. And finding ways to fill your tank, quick things like getting a good cup of coffee or calling a friend or going online on Facebook, doing some jumping jacks, but also premium fill-ups, which, watching a movie or doing an exercise class or taking a walk or doing some gardening. I always recommend tune-ups, which is time away from caregiving. That's a complicated question right now, but think about future trips you might take, or a retreat, or a spa visit someday in the future. But also routine maintenance, and that's getting enough sleep, eating well, exercise, doing your own doctor's appointments, do your due diligence for yourself, because that is contributing to making you a better caregiver. So don't feel selfish or guilty about that. That's just practical. AARP has a whole section on the website about life balance with helping you take care of yourself. We have an online community where you can connect with other caregivers, and I moderate the AARP Facebook Family Caregivers discussion group. And it is a very vibrant group. We've got about 3,500 members now. People post their challenges, their questions. Everybody helps each other. It's really a great way to connect. I want to leave you with a little advice from my daddy.
Keep cool, but don't freeze.
All right, Dad.
Okay?
Yep.
And enjoy it. Do it when you're trying to work and do it. Fine. Enjoy it and do it. That's it. Don't fight it at all.
You
give it your best shot. Lots of people do. And lots of people don't.
Mm-hmm. That's
you
true.
Hang in there.
And the one other thing.
And we, as a group,
Mm-hmm.
as far as I'm concerned, we are groups of good, period. Whether it works out a little bit or not. The way it works out, the way it works out. The way it is.
Yep.
And do it your best shot.
Okay? Okay. You always told me don't fight the problem.
Okay, everybody agreed?
Everybody's agreed.
All right. And here's to it to everyone.
So here's to all of you. Thank you so much for having me today. I fear I went way over my time. I'm sorry, Roy. I sometimes get carried away. There's so much to say.
Thank you so much, Amy. I know that we threw a lot at the folks that are watching today. Amy, if you can unshare your screen for me real quick, I would appreciate that. We are going to take just one quick little break. I'm going to show you a very quick little video. We're going to let Amy catch her breath before we go in and answer the questions. But one real quick video from one of our sponsors, the Senior Resource Guide. We talked about finding resources. Here is a great place to do that. I'm going to share that with you right now. So we're going to go to your questions right now. Before we do that, we're going to bring back Michelle Davis, who's going to facilitate for us. We're also going to bring in Melissa Crawford from the Area Agency on Aging so that she can join us. And Amy, you had talked about advanced directives, and that was one of the things that we discussed in this morning's session with attorney Virginia Sampson. So I have sent Michelle the link for the handout that Virginia had that listed all of the resources that she had and all of those pieces of paper that you need to have as a caregiver. So we're going to share that with you as well. And plus, as Amy mentioned, we're going to share not only a PDF of all of her PowerPoints, but all of those links that she discussed. So we're going to share all of that great information with you so that you will have it after today's session. But we've got some great questions here. Michelle, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, so let me see if I can get this going here. Let's see. One of our first questions was about the poll, and it was. The question says, what if your loved one is not competent to talk to you about any of the situations to be discussed? So I guess I would handle that to Amy.
Yeah, that is a big challenge. If your loved one has dementia or is in the beginning stages of some cognitive impairment, having those conversations is tricky, which is obviously why I always say talk early and talk often, because early before it's a crisis and before you can't, and often because these things change. If your loved one is in a situation where they literally cannot have those conversations, then you are put in a situation where someone needs to find the information. You can try and find out if they've worked with an accountant in terms of the financials who does their taxes and try to get that information. If you don't have power of attorney, that makes it harder. So if you already have power of attorney, you can ask a lot more questions and get healthcare information, all sorts of things much easier than if you don't. And you may have a power of attorney for finances, but not healthcare, and vice versa. So figure out what kind of that you have. I've known families who, I remember one family who said that her mother, they were trying to have these conversations with her mother. Her mother wasn't really capable of having them, and then she died suddenly, and they couldn't find anything. I think she said they finally found the information about the house insurance in her knitting basket. So you end up doing this search around the house for things, and it can be tricky when you're not there to do so. And normally I would say you need to make a trip and go and try and get all the information together. Now, right now, that can be difficult with the travel. So again, there's situations where you can hire a geriatric care manager or an attorney, a financial advisor to manage the finance. There's certain things that you can do. But again, I really urge you, if you are having trouble with this, you can also contact an attorney that specializes in dealing with people who have cognitive impairment and try and get some advice from them as well.
Okay, this one's about technology, so I'll leave that up to whoever wants to discuss that. What if your loved one cannot understand how to use technology to make connections and they're about 800 miles away in a nursing home? How do you get them involved in Zoom, FaceTime, etc.?
You know, this is one of those things where the nursing home should be facilitating that. It's just, it's unconscionable that they're not doing that. But I know in reality, a lot of them are not being as good. Some of them are fantastic. I know some facilities that, you know, immediately purchased 100 iPads and had them around and available for, you know, or at least one that they could have staff go around, but some of them don't. There are some programs that have cropped up of people who are taking donations of devices, and then they fix them up and they donate them to facilities. There's one, I wrote a column recently about a program, a teenager in Chicago who thought, I can do this with my grandparents who live in their home, but what about all the people in facilities? So she got all her friends to volunteer, and they do Zooms and things with the older adults in facilities, and she started collecting devices to get them to the facilities. So if the facility is not facilitating this, making this happen, ask why. Is it because they don't have devices? See what you can do to get devices. As I said, if you send a device, have it all set up and ready to go. Get the simplest thing you possibly can get. If it's not that, if it's a matter of they don't have the staff time, well, why don't they have the staff time? What are the activities staff doing? What are people doing? And sometimes it may be once a week, because by the time they get around to all the residents with the staff that they have, that's how long it takes. But find out if you can do that. I do think that what a lot of caregivers are doing is getting something like a smart speaker that at least, and you can get the ones with the video screens that are attached to them, like, I forget what they're called, like Amazon Show or in some of those, where you can literally, they could say, you know, call Amy, and it calls you, you know, your loved one could say that, it would call you and you could automatically see them. Or these systems that, like the one I mentioned, where it's an automatic two-way, where you could put a video camera in their room, and then you could just get on and say, hey mom, how you doing? And you can see her. Finding ones where she can see you too is you know, a tricky part. Again, you know, my boyfriend set up this system for his mom, and most people would probably have given up, because even though it seemed like it would be simple, he kept having to go over and do things to get it set up. So I do appreciate that challenge. I think in a facility is a special challenge right now, because it's not like you can send someone in there to do it necessarily. So ask the facility, ask what they need, put an effort together with the other families, the resident council, to advocate for this and to get get what they need. See if they would allow any volunteer to go in and do it. You know, some are opening up a little bit and maybe they could do it.
Okay, we have time for about 2 more questions. So I'm gonna, this one is definitely for you, Amy. The question is, how does AARP, or does AARP have a writing a will template app, etc., or recommend a free will website?
Oh, interesting. We do have a legal section on the website, and you can go in there and we have some resources on wills. I do not believe we have a tool or an app that kind of puts it together for you automatically, but we have some guidelines of what can be in the will. We do have a page for your advanced directives where you can go and find the advanced directives to download for every state. You don't necessarily need a lawyer to do your advanced directives. A will can be different, and you also need to understand the difference between a living trust and a will. Many of the states, if you go to the state, sometimes it's the Attorney General's website, have the advanced directives, and some of them will have guidelines for wills. You can also try like LegalZoom, which is a website that you can inexpensively get some legal things like wills done. Just make sure that you have everything in place for the state. These laws vary state to state.
And our one last final question is, and either you or Melissa can answer this, how do we handle loved ones who have become passive aggressive to deal with and refuse to discuss with a doctor?
I'll let Amy start, yeah.
I'll start, and then Melissa, you come in because I know you've got some things to share about this. This is one of the harder things to deal with, especially from a distance. We have people who are resistant to care, who don't want someone else involved in their business. Sometimes it's because there are some cognitive impairments starting to happen when you see this type of behavior. So try and get a good evaluation and understand what's happening cognitively and where this behavior is coming from. A lot of times it's control, and trying to understand where they're coming from, that you're losing control of your body. You feel like you're losing control of your life. Your life isn't the way you want it. There's this sense of that. And I think we need to have compassion for that and be as empowering as possible in our approach. If the question is, my loved one won't let me be part of the doctor conversations, that's another issue, and that can be tricky. And, if they're of sound mind, they don't have to let you be part of those conversations. So talk with them about why that's important, and always, always, always approach with love, and that you have the same goal. You're on the same team. Our goal is for you to be as independent as possible for as long as possible. I'm not trying to do anything to you. I'm trying to support you in doing what you want and need. Melissa, what would you add?
I don't know. I mean, exactly that. I think really recognizing this is still an individual, going through stuff, changing, things are changing around them, and really making sure that they're still being heard. And sometimes being a caregiver myself, through different situations, sometimes there's individuals or there's caregivers that come along and they remember the person when, and what that person when wanted and how they wanted it and everything. And this person is changing, and they're still trying to impose, but I know this is what you want, and you've always liked this, and you've always wanted to eat that, and and they have a trouble, the caregiver has trouble adapting to who's in front of them today. And who's in front of them today might be different than who was in front of them yesterday or tomorrow. And so just trying to be in that space, in that time with this person, and hear what they have to say today. Because like you said, Amy, things are diminishing, things are kind of falling away, but whatever they can still be a part of, they should be a part of that. And to whatever degree that they want to invite you into that, as much as we can with in keeping them safe and healthy, we need to respect that. And, if today they don't want a bath, but they just took one yesterday, and it's okay. It's okay. We don't have to do this today. If ice cream's, on the agenda, then it's going to be ice cream today. So just really, and we're going to have a great session also tomorrow with Marty Richards, the keynote and care sharing. And so, whoever's out there that maybe hasn't already registered for tomorrow, jump on, be a part, listen to that conversation. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, listen to who they are, affirm them, confirm them, and cooperate with them. So maybe it's not going to be all their way. It's not going to be all my way, but together we're on the same team, like your daddy said, and we're going to do the best we can by hearing and respecting one another.
Absolutely. And I think the other part of this, don't you think, is looking at mental health issues. It may be that there's not cognitive impairment, but behavior changes can, a lot of people develop depression and anxiety in their older years that maybe never had that before. Yes. So if you're seeing any kind of behavior changes, resistance, there may be depression going on, chemical changes in the brain,
medicines that they're taking,
medication interactions. So be sure and evaluate that whole, are they eating well? Are they sleeping well? All of those basic things start to make a big difference in how people interact and how they behave and the decisions they make. So try to take a step back, take a look at the whole picture for that person.
And oftentimes it doesn't have to be handled at that exact moment. Like you said, right. Really step back. We'll pick this up again after a while or later tomorrow.
And validate, right? Validate how they're feeling. It's kind of, with dementia, it's always important to validate and then distract. So I think that actually applies in lots of situations, not just dementia. Okay, what are you feeling right now? Why are you being resistant? What's going on? And validate that. You must be feeling really out of control, or you must be feeling scared, or is this really hard for you? Or, try and understand where they're coming from and validate those feelings.
And also in many situations with our parents, as children of the parents, we're looking at a role reversal now, that as the caregiver, we are becoming in many ways the parent to the parent. And there's a lot of times there's resistance to that. I have personal experience with that. And what I found that helped in some cases when we were talking about these big issues, I don't want to talk about that right now. Well, at some point we're going to have to talk about it. Bring in a third party of somebody that they know and they respect, their minister, or a friend who's been their friend for a very long time. Let them start that conversation and utilize them. As the child of the parent, you can say something 40,000 times to your parent, and then it's that one time that one other person says the exact same thing, and the parent goes, "Oh yeah, I guess I should do that." And you're going, "Oh!"
I was like that with my grandfather. My dad would ask him to do things, wouldn't do it. If I asked him, he was happy to do it. And I don't know if that was because I was the expert in the field of aging, or because I was a generation removed,
Right. But sometimes, sometimes that third party is helpful. The doctor, the minister, the friend, somebody that they will actually, they will listen to, that, utilize them as an ally in this. Amy, thank you so much for this amazing information. We know that we presented so much for you today. And as we promised, we are going to send you the resources, the links, the PDFs. We're going to give you all of that. Before we go, though, I want to throw back to Melissa real quick, because Melissa, for folks who are long distance caregiving, I am here, mom is there, or vice versa. I know that the Area Agency on Aging is always one of the great first places to go to look for resources, because since the Area Agency on Aging is funded through the pass-through funds, the Older Americans Act, it means that there is an Area Agency on Aging that represents pretty much every square inch of the U.S. Is that correct?
Absolutely. There's, approximately 622 nonprofit organizations nationwide that serve the older population in their local areas. So anywhere you can go, like she mentioned, the Elder Care Locator. There's also N4A.org, where you can just go in there, put in your zip, and you can find the Area Agency on Aging that can provide some support services for you in your region. You know, maybe, again, you're in one state, mom's in another state, then you would look for the one where mom is at. But they can provide assistance, information, and referral with services, and they all have a different suite of services, but there's some basic services that are provided by nearly all of them, such as nutrition, caregiver support, information referral and assistance, long-term care ombudsman, which I know was mentioned, and benefits counseling. So definitely reach out, give them a call. They'll spend some time. It's person-centered. So they're going to listen to the family. They're going to come alongside that family, find out what's that family's mission, what are they wanting to do, and then work together to develop care plans. Like Amy said, she spent a lot of time, oh my gosh, a plethora of information, but it all requires time to prepare, to plan, to gather, to do all those things. And if you reach out to an area agency on aging in you know, the area of the care recipients, then quite likely you might be able to get some respite, you know, a short-term temporary assistance in the home if that's what you wish, either through a contracted provider agency or through an individual that you know that you're comfortable coming into the home to take care of mom, dad, or both. And that's going to give you some time not just to take a breath, but to go back and look through some of these videos and figure out, you know, where am I hitting it? Where am I hitting it? And where am I missing some things? And gather that, work on that long-term care plan or that next action step. Maybe it's just a short-term situation. But we can provide some respite in those situations, and maybe it's not respite, maybe it's information, numbers to call. So yes, no matter where you are, you know, reach out, give us a call. We'd love to talk to you, come alongside and be a part of your journey.
And likewise, Age of Central Texas is here as well with all that resources, information, along with the Area Agency on Aging of the Capital Area. Contact us. Let us help you. We'll help connect those dots for you. We'll help find those resources that you need. And most importantly, we will give you the tools that you need so that you feel like you can do this. And you can. And we're going to help you through that. Again, Amy, thank you so much for taking the time out to visit with us today, share so much wonderful information. Michelle, Melissa, thank you so much for your expertise as well. We want to encourage you to join us for tomorrow and on Thursday. We've got 4 more sessions for the Striking Balance Caregiver Conference. Great information. And again, all of these videos are going to be posted online, so you'll be able to review them and participate later. We hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you again soon. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.